Hello, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing the next part. We're going to be doing JavaScript for our tic-tac-toe project. So what I've got here is I've modified the project slightly so we have a computer player, but I'm going to show you where to insert just player one, player two, where we're going to kind of flip. All right, we're going to flip-flop. All right, in between player one, and you can just make it player two versus the computer. But I'm going to give you a little bit of the computer logic. It's not a very smart computer; it's just a random. But it actually has some logic that'll check to see if the squares have already been selected by a player or the computer already. So that's I think that's probably the hardest part to get. After that, you can actually look up various game strategy algorithms for tic-tac-toe. If you just Google it, you can find it. I'd like to see some of you actually go through and add that into the tic-tac-toe game and then share that back with me because I think that would be really cool. But for right now, I'm going to do a computer-based player, okay? And so we've already have our index.html done, we have our index.css done, and now we're going to be working on our index.js or our JavaScript file. So I've already laid some stuff out for everybody, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and kind of show you what I'm looking at here. And this is what I'm going to go over today right in here. We're going to start off by defining some basic variables that we're going to need here. All right, then I want to decide what happens when I click on a square. So here's my index, here's the squares. I should be able to click on these and then I'm going to do something. What do I want to do? Well, I want to check to see if the square's already been selected. All right, if it's already been selected, I might just throw an alert up, or you can do just a console log. It's up to you how you want to handle your alerts, or to tell them to select something else, or you can just have it do nothing. That's up to you how you want to handle that. Then I'm going to add a class X or O. Now, remember, I have a blank X or O class. It just has a simple background color. I'm going to use this X and O class here to append. I'm going to add that class, then append something else to these squares themselves. All right. And then I want to see if I won. How do I know if I won? Well, I'm actually just going to check and see if I have 3 in a row. Since there's only 9 squares, right? There could be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's about 8 different ways that you can win. So all I'm going to do is just add those in manually. So I'm going to have to check if I win, which function for that, which I'm going to make. Then I'm going to toggle the player, and then you can have player 2 go. Now, optionally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the computer select a random square, which is going to require another helper function. And this is where your computer logic is going to go. And this is where you can actually build out a more robust computer logic. Also, which would not be very hard at this point, once you get this logic down, would be to add a simple bootstrap button or something right in here, right? That you can actually toggle back and forth between 1 or 2 player play, and that will require just an extra piece of logic, an extra if-else statement as well. So you can actually have both built in. So again, the point is just to kind of show you how to get started, not to, that way you can add your own stuff in here, not to give you absolutely everything. Alrighty, so that's what we're going to do, and then we're also going to check to see if the computer won as well. So let's get started. Let's jump in with this, and I'm going to not use the shorthand this time, just because I like to switch back and forth. So we do have jQuery loaded in here, so we could just go with $sign function. Otherwise, you can go with remember document. All right, and then as soon as the document loads, you can ready, and then you can kind of see it's already looking for a function. So the first thing we're going to do is load up a function in here, and that function, okay, like this, and this is where everything goes, okay? I'm going to give myself a little bit of space here, and I'm going to start by adding in some variables. So what variables do I want to define? All right, that's what I got to decide. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a variable, and I'm just going to call it player. And I'm going to set a default player equal to 1. All right, because now with this we can have player 1 or player 2, or we can just have player 1 and player CPU, however you want to define this. So you can have this as a string, you can have this as a number, player 1, 0, 1, 2, however you're going to use that to check. The next thing I want to do is I need to be able to select a random number between 0 and 9 because we have 9 different squares. All right, so I'm going to call this random. Okay, and random, all right, is going to equal this. And again, this is something that you've seen before. I've used it before. If you do a simple Google, how do you do a random number? All you're doing is you're going to start off with floor. Math.floor is going to take the number and round it to the lowest integer. Math.random, okay, math.random is a function that's going to give you a random number between a float number between 0 and 1. So you take 0 and 1, and you can multiply that by the number you want. So I want 9 options. All right, so I want between 1 and 9. So what this random is going to give me is something that is from 0 to 9, right? But it's going to round down. All right, it's going to round down. So what we're really going to get is from 0 to 8. I don't want from 0 to 8. I want from 1 to 9. So I am just going to add that. That's what our math.floor does. Now you could do math.ceiling and then subtract 1 as well. But math.floor is a pretty simple way to do this. And then I also added in, I actually had a, as for a test, as I was testing the logic, I needed another random number between 1 and 9. So I actually have another variable in mind that you're going to see what it's going to be called rand. But this, again, I use for debugging. And I used it for logic. So as I was testing things in our console log, because you can use your console log to see what's going on. So what I did is I actually used this again here. And the reason I have that, again, is when I was going through a debugging process. And so I'm going to leave some of these little steps in here so that way you can kind of add a console log in different spots with different variables so you can kind of see what's going on. And I made that just a random number, and I was using this as well. We don't really need this, so you don't need this line. But I just figured I had it. I still have it in my code, so in case you link to my code, you kind of see why it's there. The next part here, all right, is a tag. Okay, what's a tag? Okay, so I have this class that I have square, and if you remember your CSS, you have a square class that defines the squares and that lines them all up really nicely. All right. However, not only do I have a square, but I have square 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and all the squares. All right. Notice that are SQ1, SQ2, SQ3. All right. So I want to append things to this class, right? So how do I know what square I am selecting? So I need to have a variable that I can tag on a number to. All right, so all the SQs are the same. The only thing I'm changing is 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, all that kind of stuff. So in order to do that, especially for my computer logic, you need to actually have a tag. So what I'm going to have this be is I'm going to have my random number. I'm going to set my random number. So if I want a random number between 1 and 9, so this is how I did this. So I'm going to just finish typing this out, actually, then I'll show you. So I have .sq. So if you have .sq, all right, notice that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 that shows up here, okay? All right, well, that's something. So as I was originally using my .rand with my console logs, like I was telling you to go in, and that we didn't really need it in the beginning. So you're not really going to need this as much if you're going through and you're doing your 2-player. But since I'm going to show you how to do it with a computer, this rand becomes all of a sudden important. Why does it become important? Because what I might do actually is I'm going to go through and I'm going to give you your random square function as well, just so you kind of have an idea of how this is working. All right. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be appending this SQ, and then I need SQ random between 1 and 9. So what I need to do here, all right, is I need to make sure that I add. Now, when you add, what I'm going to be doing here is I don't want to add mathematically. All right. What I want to add is a random number, which is going to be rand. And now, if I call rand the variable, it's going to give me any random number, just one random number. Okay, so mind you, right now, rand is one random number. All right, it's not dynamic, it's not changing. All right, it's just giving me a random number between 1 and 9. And what I'm going to do is use dot to, right, dot to string. All right, and oops, already had that on there. Move my mouse out of the way so you can see this. So right now, if I call tag, all right, and I call tag, I'll get dot sq and then some number between 1 and 9. So I can actually identify these individual squares, which are these individual squares. So what I've done now is if I call tag once, I'm going to get one random individual square. All right, hopefully that makes sense. In order, while we're kind of on this thought process here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to define the helper function first. All right, and if you want, you can start by testing it. All right, so you can actually test what you will get by going through your console log, and you will see you're going to get a random square selected. Now, before I get too far into the logic, there's always something that I'm going to forget. Look at all this stuff down here. I have a reload, I have player 1, and I have Hal that has won the game. All right, I don't want this stuff here. Let's hide this stuff real quick before I forget, because I'm going to end up forgetting later. So how do I select things? All right, I need to select things using jQuery. What do I want to select? Well, I want to select something by its, all right, let's go by its, so what do I call these buttons down here, right? So I have buttons, oh look, ID. So let's grab things by ID. So let's hide ID reload, win, and ID Hal, okay? So as soon as the first thing it does with the page load is I'm going to take the reload. So, and then I want to hide that, right? So hide, and same thing here. Win, I'm going to hide that. Hide. And I want to make sure that I have this, and I just called it now. Hide. Okay, let's get back to the logic here. So, like I was saying, we have a random square that we can select by calling this var tag. All right, that's just going to give us a random square. But the problem is that's only one random square, and that only works once. Well, that doesn't really help us. Because if we have the computer just select the random square right now, it's going to keep selecting the same square. And if I already have some logic that checks to see if the square's already been selected, I'm going to be getting an error, just a constant error over and over and over and over and over again, because the computer is going to keep trying to select the same exact square, which is already going to be selected. So this is the concept that we're going to use right here. Okay, this dot square, that we can add this class to something. All right, but I want to keep calling this random function. Okay, so how are we going to do this? So this is going to be sort of the most complicated part. So I'm going to actually come over here, and I'm going to define a function. And I'm going to call this function random square. And what does random square going to do? It's going to have the computer. I'm going to bring in one argument, and I'm going to call it random. All right, so I'm going to pass it something random. Come in here. Okay. All right, so here we go. Let's see. So I have this ready to go. Boop. Okay. So this right here that I'm going to start doing has to do with our tag and selecting a random square. And this is just going to be the computer firing off. All right. So what do I do? All right. So here now I have tag set to one random square. So tag says, hey, select this. And let's say the random number just happened to be 5. All right. So 5, it can select 5. 5 is fine for the first time if the player didn't select it and if the computer already hasn't selected it. problem is the computer's already selected it or the player's already selected it. We have to have it redo this process again. What process? Well, just recalculate this random. And now, since this is a function here, this rand is actually only really associated with this function. So this, you can call this whatever you want. The reason that I'm using this same rand is just for when you come back and read it, just makes more sense that you're just going to be appending this again. Random, not randan, random square. All right. So what do I want to do? Okay. So what do I want to say? I'm going to create a while loop. All right. And while, not while 9. All right. So while, all right, I want to identify this tag here. So while, I'm going to use jQuery to select something. All right. And what is it going to select? Well, I want it to select whatever this tag is here. So tag. All right. So again, tag is looking at this variable. All right. So now this variable. All right. If this already has a class on it, X or O, that's what I'm going to be selecting. All right. So if this already has so this tag identifies a square. So does this random square over here already have a class X or O? And every time I click on it, I'm going to add a class X or O. Or anytime the computer selects it, it's going to have a class X or O. Make sense? So does tag, meaning this whatever random initial square, does that has class? All right, so does that random square already have a class of X? Okay. Familiar with this? Does it have a class of X, or does it have a class of O? And it's going to be the same thing here. So Control C, Control V. Oh, here's my classes X or O. I can add these classes to the squares after I select them. So did I already select these by adding the class X or O? Okay, that's all this is saying. Does it already have the class X or O? So all I'm going to do is I'm going to be stuck inside this while loop that's going to say, okay, does this tag, okay, and tag is going to be identifying one of these squares, 1 through 9. So it's going to keep selecting squares until the square does not have a tag X or O. So this statement, this while statement is true. So during the time that this while statement is true, we're going to keep cycling through here. Give myself a space for readability. So does it have X? Does it have O? Yes. Then I want to do something. What is the thing that I want to do? Well, remember from before, all I want to do is keep calculating this. And the reason that I put rand in the same way as I've done before, I don't need the var in here, so I already passed it in here. See? Control V. So you can see I'm reusing the code right there. Now, rand doesn't have to be rand. You could change this name. These are two different things, okay? Even though the tag works the same way in the beginning, where you set rand to something and then you have the tag that appends to it. All right, the reason I've done this is just so mentally when I come back and look at this later, I understand what's going on, even though you have to understand that this rand and this rand are different. But it just kind of helps you out. All right. So what am I doing? So you have this math.rand, and then you want to reset that tag, right? And so that tag, then I'm going to recalculate that. Control C, Control V. So I calculated it once for one random square. So if I calculate it again, I will get another random square. Now, does that new random square then, so that it's going to perform this operation, then check, does that new random square has X or O? Yes or no? Yes or no? If it's a yes, it has something on it, it's going to recalculate it. Recalculate what? This right here, which is giving us a random square. All right. So that's all that while loop does. So as soon as I call random square, it's just going to keep, you know, blip, 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 all the way through these until it finds one that does not have a class on it. And that is my AI. That's all my AI does. It's random. It's only random. All right. Now you can do this. Notice that I'm having it go through this random function. Now you can have a random starting point, which is fine, but this is where any advanced logic would go in here. Well, if you try to figure out an algorithm that actually has, that makes a good choice, right? Where you can actually have it go through different checks and actually other helper functions to check different winning conditions. So this is where all that would go. All right. So depending on how deep you want to dive into this, this is where that would go. And then you have to have a return statement. So essentially, we're going to keep going through and doing this, right? So here's our while right there. Oops. And then after that, all I have to do is return something, right? So I'm just going to return tag. And that's it. And I'm going to use that tag to append stuff to later. And it's that simple. So it's a very simple chunk of code here for the random square selector. So again, it's going to keep iterating through until it finds something that doesn't already have this tag on it, and then it's just going to return that tag. So there's our helper function. All right. Now, the other helper function that we need to do is check to see if we won. So now we know how we can check to see if we have random squares. Let's check to see if we won. So how do we do this? All right. So I'm going to create a new helper function. I'll give myself some space. This is going to be my helper function for did I win? And all I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be passing this a symbol. Okay. So I'm passing in a symbol. All right. So remember, we can always, depending on what we pass in, this is what we're going to check. So here we go. Let's start this one off. And all I'm going to do is have a series of true or falses. And all of this is going to be as if, else 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 if, so on and so forth. So the first thing I'm going to do is check for winning conditions. So if we have an if, all right, well, let's do this. This is going to be the tedious part. So how do we win? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then you have this one, this one, this one. So we're going to go through and just list all of our cases. All right, there's about 8 of them. So let's go in here and we will say if we want to select dot sq1, so square one. So if square one, all right, as class symbol. Now, notice that we can run this did I win function for x's or o's because this symbol that I'm going to pass in is going to be x or o because that's going to be the class that I'm going to pass it. Okay, so make sure when you put did I win, you're going to pass in x or o. Why? Because it just kind of makes sense. So I don't have to write this twice. So I'm going to have class symbol x or o and, right? Same thing. So we have square one has class symbol, and then we're going to have, start with the first 3. B. So if square 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3 has class symbol, which means they're all x's or they're all o's. All right, that's what we're saying right here. What do I do? All I gotta do is return true. All right. Why? I'm looking for did I win. If did I win is true, the game is over. So at the end, I'm going to have else if, else if, else if, else if. My last statement is going to be false, which means none of the winning statements have occurred. All right. So then we're going to have an else if, else if, else if here, and this else if is going to be, let's go ahead and grab this. See, Control V. All right, so we're going to have else if here, return true. And I'm going to start listing out cases. So how many of these cases do I need total? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 cases. All right. How is that? Well, I wrote it down on a piece of paper ahead of time, and I tried to figure out all of them. So there's 8 different cases. So right now, I have 2. So Control C. Right. Let's see. Else if. Okay. Return true. Okay. There's all right, so it's 4, 5, 6, 7. Oops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And again, that. All right. And if none of that is true, else. Return false. Okay. And that is it for that. So let's see. It looks like I have an unmatched. Do I have an unmatched bracket here? Okay, there we go. Had an unmatched bracket. So bracket, bracket. Good, 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 good. And I'm going to take all these. And I'll tab them over. That makes sense. All right. So what are the cases? So I have square 1, 2, 3. And then I have square 4, 5, 6. And then I have square 7, 8, 9. So that takes care of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Then I have square 1, 4, 7. 1, 4, 7. And you can kind of see what I'm doing. The next is going to be 2, 5, 8, right? So 1, 4, 7. And then 2, 5, 8. Then square 3, 6, 9. Square 3, 6, 9. And then the last one we have are our diagonals. So 1, 5, 9. And then the opposite diagonal, right? Which is going to be square 7, square 5, and then square 3. All right. There we go. So now I've gone ahead and yeah, that's my warning for jQuery. That's okay, because it didn't load jQuery. So now I have everything hidden when I load the page. All right, I have everything hidden. Tic-tac-toe, buttons are hidden, and then I've got my helper functions set and ready to go. So I have a random square class that takes this tag that I made that started off random and re-randomizes it until I no longer have a square that has been selected, and then it uses that, okay? So then it selects that square. Then I also have a did I win helper function. This did I win helper function is now just checking for all the victory conditions. And now, finally, right in here is where I'm going to get started with the actual, what actually happens when you click on a square, All right, and this is going to tie everything together, and this is going to be the game logic itself. So we're all set up and ready to go. But since I've already been talking for such a long time, I'm going to take a break here, and then I'm going to come back with the last video. Then we're going to tie everything all together in our last video. Then we're going to be able to have a functional game. So like always, I hope this was helpful for you all, and I will see you all next time.